am Dr. Julie Tennille. I'm the program director and principal investigator for the Health, Resources and Services Administration, Behavioral Health, Workforce and Education Training Grant, which we've rebranded EPIC because it's just so much easier and it really communicates what we're all about. It's education and programming for integrated care. And I'm here with my awesome, amazing colleague, Wendy Myers, who's the program coordinator for this grant program for EPIC. And Wendy and I tonight are going to be just sort of like trading back and forth. I'll present some information on a few slides. Wendy will present some information on a few slides, and then we'll wrap up and we'll save questions, if it's okay, until the end of our presentation. I don't think we're going to be more than 15, 18 minutes tops. But hold on to your questions, and then we'll be happy to kind of toggle back to some slides that we might show in the beginning. But we're really excited that you're here with us tonight. This is a really, really thrilling time for us because it's the second year of our competing continuation grant. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the history of this grant in a minute. But welcome, welcome. You may be part of our 2022-2023 cohort, and that's really cool. As I mentioned, we've got 3 programs: the Doctoral in Psychology program, the MSW program, and the MED School Counseling program. So here's our agenda just for these next 15 minutes. I'm going to give you a very brief and quick overview. We're going to operationalize some of the terms that we use in this grant. We're going to talk about the particular qualifications of your field sites in your specialized year since you're with MSW. And we're going to talk about requirements of you as students. There are certain things that we would want in exchange for your participation in this program. This is a research study, so we're going to be conducting some research. And it's important to also know that these are competitive applications, and these are competitive stipends that we'll get into a little bit. And we're going to give you some date ranges to think about. We don't have precise dates tonight, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get toward the end of the presentation. And then, as I mentioned, we'll get into questions and answers at the end. So please, jot down some questions that you have as we go along. So there's a little bit of history with this grant. Nadine Bean, who is now a retired professor emeritus of the MSW program, some of you may know her, you may have met her, wrote a grant in 2017 that was funded. It was funded to the tune of like $1.6 million, and it was focused on integrated care. So we've had these like $10,000 stipends and this program for a number of years now. And this time last year, we were writing a grant that was getting ready to be submitted in January. That was for a competing continuation, essentially, of the 4 years of this grant. So just to back up a quick second, Nadine decided to retire a little bit early and asked if I would run the grant for the 4th and final year. So Wendy, who'd been the program coordinator, stuck around and continued on with the grant, and it really helped me understand some of the very, very particular specifics of the way the grant was running so that we could kind of keep it in motion. But we learned this summer that we got the competing continuation that was submitted back in January, and this was even more money, over $1.9 million from HRSA, we call it HRSA, to fund our EPIC program. And the difference in this program is that it trains students, behavioral health students, so social workers, school counselors, and doctoral students in psychology, to work in behavioral health settings, serving a specific population, so exclusively children, adolescents, and transitional youth in high need areas. And I think the best thing about this program, from my perspective, and I think from a lot of people's perspective, is that not only are you getting this like really cool immersion in integrated care and interprofessional education that Wendy will talk about in a moment a little bit more, but you're also getting these pretty unrestricted stipends. So for master's students, you would get a $10,000 stipend. And if you were a PsyD student or a doctoral in psychology student, you would be eligible for a $25,000 stipend if you get this award. And that's just a great thing because you can pay off a credit card, or you can, I don't know, get extra hours of babysitting, or you can do whatever you want because you know best what you need with extra money. And I think for some students that we've had in our EPIC program, it's allowed them to focus a little bit more concertedly on their education. And that's really wonderful. So the goal of the grant, I mean, pretty simply, and we can get into this a little bit more in Q&A, is to expand the behavioral workforce that's serving children, adolescents, and transitional age youth in high need areas. And the way that we do this, and Wendy will talk a little bit more about this too, but we provide a lot of training. So there's 4 trainings a year, but we just had a symposium this past fall that was focused on integrated care and support for trans and gender diverse children and adolescents. And it's really interesting stuff. It's stuff that's sometimes outside of the area of what's taught in your typical classes. And for me, I think that's a pretty exciting thing. So you're getting a really deep dive into these different topics, and you're learning from different types of professions about, working, in best practices and providing behavioral health to this population. So I'll turn it over to Wendy.
So there's, hello everybody. So there's some common acronyms and definitions that we use in the grant or in EPIC, and I just wanted to kind of go over the most important ones that you'll hear the most often. The grant is the money that was awarded from HRSA to Westchester University. And the stipend is the money that is given to the student awardees. And I want to make the difference between the two, because particularly for tax issues, they're very different. So if you are awarded, if you become part of this program and you're awarded a stipend, you are not receiving the grant, you are receiving a stipend. So I just want to make that distinction clear. And as we move forward, you're part of a grant program, but you're actually receiving a stipend. We also talk a lot about IPE, that means interprofessional education. And we talk a lot IC, that's just short for integrated care. We are hoping, we want to get you to work in behavioral health in integrated care settings, and we're preparing you to do that by immersing you in settings that you would work on an integrated care team. And an integrated care team means that you're working with more than just one professional. We're breaking down the silos, and we are preparing you also by doing that by giving you interprofessional education while you're here at Westchester. So your class would be with an interprofessional group of students, and the trainings are presented by interprofessionals, I guess is the way to put it. I don't know. So we're giving you the interprofessional education so that you can go out and work in integrated care and on integrated care teams. Also, you may see a lot MUP and MUA. They kind of mean the same thing. An MUP is a medically underserved population, and an MUA is a medically underserved area. We also call them high need populations or high need areas. So if that's areas that have a high population level that is usually underserved, it's exactly what it sounds like. So those are the common acronyms and definitions. So a lot of times we get this big question, what field sites qualify? Where is the list of field sites? Well, we don't have a list of field sites. We talk about each field site individually, and we make the decision as a team as to whether or not they can guarantee that the students who are placed there work directly and primarily with children, adolescents, and transitional aged youth. The field site, so like if you're at a children's hospital, bonus. We know that you'll be working with directly and primarily with children, adolescents, and transitional age youth. But a hospital setting that isn't a children's hospital, we can't guarantee that you would be working primarily with children there. So each case we decide individually. We work very closely with our field directors to discuss that. And that's the criteria right there, directly and primarily. And you cannot be doing macro placements because it has to be a clinical integrated care setting. The other question we get is what qualifies you to apply? So if you're sitting here, that tells me that you're going into your final year of field placement in the 22-23 academic year. So that's one of the qualifications. And you need to be doing that field placement in the fall, spring semesters contiguously. So you can't break it up. And the MSW department doesn't break them up anyhow. So that's usually not a problem. You also must be referred to, interviewed at, or have been accepted to a qualified field site before the application needs to be submitted. So Lena and Melissa have already started interviewing you for next year's field placements. They're starting to get an idea of where you're going to be referred. By the time the application is released, you will need to have been referred to that field site. So if you haven't met with Lena and Melissa yet, do it immediately. Do it as soon as possible so that when February 1st comes around, you can get that, they can get that referral out that week right away. And then this is a requirement by HRSA, not by us. You must be a US citizen, US national, or foreign national who possesses a visa permitting permanent residence in the United States. If you are on a temporary or student visa, HRSA does not allow you to receive the funds. So the awardee requirements, if you are accepted, it is a competitive application process, and we'll talk about that timeline a little bit later. If you are accepted into the program, you must successfully complete your field placement. That's a requirement. And there is also an additional class, SWG 592, Advanced Clinical Practice in Integrated Health, that is held during the winter term of 2023. For MSW students, that counts as one of your 3 electives. If you have already taken all 3 of your electives and you're accepted into the program, you still have to take the class, and it is an additional cost to you. We do not cover the cost of the grant. Now, a lot of students use the grant money to pay for the class or reimburse themselves if the grant money comes later, use their stipends that way. But we do not pay for the class. There are also 4 2-hour-long interprofessional education trainings throughout the course of the academic year. There are 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring. They run from 6 to 8 p.m. and are on weeknights. And it is required that you attend them live. They are virtual, they are online. So you don't have to come to campus or anything like that, but you have to be there. And then you also are required to complete all the surveys, pre and post tests, including year-end surveys. HRSA requires that we get a 1-year post-graduation follow-up survey, and we do surveys throughout the year as well. And then HRSA has also partnered with the University of Chicago, NORC, and they send us usually about a year to 2 years after you graduate, another survey for you to complete. And they keep adding surveys. So that's why we say, but not limited to, because we just don't know what they're going to throw at us. And you are required to do all of that as well.
Okay, so this is just a reminder that we don't want you to waste your time in completing a pretty extensive application if you're unable to adhere to those requirements that Wendy just referred to. So if you can't attend those evening trainings, or if you can't take that January elective course that runs over 2 weeks, then, or if you're not working with children, we don't want you to waste your time. So just a reminder that, yeah, don't apply if you're not able to adhere to all of those things. So here's a little bit more information. You could lose your stipend if you earn a stipend via this competitive process. If you leave your field placement for any reason, if the field site terminates your placement for any reason, if you don't complete that course that's taught in January and complete all 4 of those EPIC trainings. And again, just a reminder that we're collecting data pre and post the trainings and pre and post the course. So, so this is sort of the thing that you're signing on for. And then just sort of, other unforeseeable circumstances that we can't possibly imagine, but we're super fair folks and we're very collaborative and usually, well, nothing's happened so far. So, but we always have to put that up there. Maybe there's something we haven't even imagined. Okay, so we are just kind of putting this up here. We don't have dates nailed down for when we're releasing the application, when the applications will be due, when you'll be notified of, as to whether or not you've won the award, or when you're going to have this commitment letter. This is just sort of the sequence of steps that we'll be taking. And our team will reach out to you and let you know for sure what these dates are when we've kind of settled with our field directors, Melissa and Lena, and our administration team in MSW and the PsyD folks and the MED school counseling folks. The class will definitely be offered during the winter break in January 2023 over 2 weeks. And it's usually starts on like January 3rd or 4th. And it's synchronous Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for those 2 weeks, and asynchronous on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's a course that I co-teach with a nutrition professor, Dr. Patricia Davidson. And we have lots of interesting guest speakers who are in the field, who are also scholars that focus on integrated care, but it's an interprofessional experience. So you'll be learning alongside other professions about those professions. They'll be learning about you as social workers, since we only have social workers on this town hall tonight. But that's exciting. And then what our hope is really is that you go on to sort of leverage this experience when you get out into the job market. As Wendy mentioned, we have 4 EPIC training sessions, and these are roughly the dates that we're going to hold these trainings on weeknights from 6 to 8. And here's our contact information. You are more than welcome to reach out to me or to Wendy. The people that we have as liaisons who are our close partners obviously are Melissa Dietzig Berlin and Lena Smith, our field directors from Westchester and Philly, Garbo Goodkin, who is our liaison from and the field person from MED School Counseling, and Dr. Deanne Zotter, who is the field person in the doctoral and psychology program. And at this point, we would just love to kind of turn it back to you and invite you to ask any questions. I'll leave the slide deck up for now in case you want to toggle back to like an older slide. I know somebody's got a question in there because somebody in this room is in my 501 class. And she's smiling and laughing and I can see her. But look at you holding back, Joanne. Anyway, please don't, feel inhibited. Like, we want your questions. And if you have it, I guarantee you somebody else has that question too.
Okay, I'll bite. How many MSW students do you anticipate accepting into the program?
19.
19?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's more than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, this $1.92 million grant can stretch a long way. And that's such a good question because one of the other things that we really appreciate about HRSA is that they demand that we allocate 60% of our grant funding to students directly in the form of stipends. So there's not a lot of administrative overhead. Much of it goes literally to like the university and then to these positions that support the kind of functioning of the grant. Yeah, great question. Other questions?
Natalie asked, she said her mic's not working. Sorry, Natalie. Can you define MUA specifically? Is there a standard metric? There is a standard metric. They have when we fill it out, a medically underserved area is an area that has, oh my gosh, Dr. Tennille, you'll have to remind me of what it is, but they lay out zip codes that the HRSA has, that the US government has said these are designated as medically underserved areas. And for our case, they were looking for a low number of behavioral health professionals compared to the number in the population. So they have these very specific zip codes and charts and blah, 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 and we went through them. And so what we did when we applied for the grant is we said, yes, we have these zip codes in the area that Westchester University serves through our internship program. And here's the data that proves that, yes, we serve these areas. And then once we determined, or once HRSA said, okay, yeah, you do, then we know that all of our students that we're serving these MUAs and these MUPs. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay.
Thanks, Wendy. Caitlin, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry if you answered this and I got lost in the asynchronous versus synchronous of the class. Is it in person at Westchester or in Philly, or is it over Zoom? Just curious.
So yeah, good question. So it is over Zoom, and it's synchronous on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays of the 2 weeks from like 9 in the morning to 12:30. And then there's asynchronous activity that you'll also engage in on the Tuesdays and Thursdays of those 2 weeks. So other questions that you have? You know, one thing I want to mention that I realized we didn't mention in the presentation is that Wendy and I aren't reviewing applications. Like, nobody in our department reviews your application. So once those applications are released and you have them for a couple of weeks, you'll complete them, you'll send them to Wendy. And then what Wendy does is she de-identifies them and takes off your name and identifying information. And then they get sent to a member of the Interprofessional Education Task Force at the university level. And this is a task force that I co-chair with my colleague, Patricia Davidson. And it's comprised of folks from public health and social work and nursing and sports medicine and speech and language pathology. And there's a couple of other professions in there too, but there are 4 individuals on that task force that have agreed to review our applications. And none of them, if you're, let's say, you know, if this is still all MSW students and there are no, you know, all MSW students are reviewed by a different discipline. So there's no one who's reviewing your application that could anecdotally identify, oh, this is Caitlin, or you know, this is Tanya. That's not possible. And that's something that we've done to kind of make it you know, sort of bias free, and you know, to kind of address some of the concerns that people might have if we were to be, you know, reviewing your applications.
One of the other things we didn't mention in this is way back when Dr. Bean wrote this grant, she worked out something with the financial aid office. Not sure what she did, but she worked her magic. And the grant will not affect your financial aid through Westchester University. But in saying that, if you get funds from other sources, so like if you're a veteran and you get veterans funds or something else, you may want to consult with that third party and see if this stipend would affect that. We can't get involved with that. We don't know how that works, which is why we're, you know, it's arranged that it's not going to affect your financial aid here, but you may want to check your other areas. And again, this is where the difference between a grant and a stipend is important, is that a grant has certain connotations, both for tax purposes and everything, and as does a stipend. So if you have any concerns about that, we can't answer any tax questions. We can't answer any of that. Talk to your tax preparer, the person who prepares your taxes, and see how it's going to affect you, if at all.
Yeah, so thank you, Wendy. So Natalie's asking, are there placements you recommend over others? And I think this is a conversation to have with the field directors when you're meeting about your specialized field placement. You have thoughts about where you'd like to be. And I don't know, Melissa and Lena, if you feel like weighing in on this or just like, making a few remarks. It's so like in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I feel like, sorry, I was just eating dinner off camera. No, I mean, I think there's definitely, it kind of is taking some getting used to for me at least, knowing that, and with the previous grant, with the previous first go around, with this, that we had a list to go off of. And it was very straightforward as to what sites qualified and what sites didn't. We can get more creative, we don't have a list to go off of, which is great because we can really look at new sites. We could look at, the different types of work that they do. We can find out from sites that, oh, we didn't know that this site did, work with children and families. So we're discovering more about some of the sites that we're utilizing. But there will be, times where, I picked up the phone and asked Wendy, I stayed on a meeting afterwards and I was like, hey, Wendy and Dr. Tennille, like with this placement work, what do you think about this? So if there are placements that we're unsure about, we'll just have a conversation and kind of talk through it. So, it's kind of what we do. Lena and I consult with each other all the time, and we're going to consult with Julie and Wendy, through this entire process. So if you're unsure, about after this meeting, if you're unsure, we'll take a look at that, at your preferences again, and just, there are some that I'm very sure about, that would be a qualifying site. And then there's some that I'm just like, I'm not quite sure. And most of them, to be transparent, is around the the transition age youth. I know I had to get some clarity around what that meant, and I know it works differently. Sometimes it's like 16 to 26, sometimes it's up to 25, sometimes it's 23. So I just wanted to, like, for how this grant is describing transition age youth, I wanted to ensure that we had that defined. And then some of the locations and the types of practice, I think are going to be what some of the areas that I'm probably going to be consulting, around, just to make sure that the setting and the location, would meet the qualifications.
Yeah, I think another one we get a lot of questions on are sites that deal with families. Because some, people say, oh, families, there must be children involved, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you're only dealing with the parents and you're not actually really dealing with the kids themselves. So like maybe foster placement, and you're doing training with the parents, but you're not really interacting with the children. And so it sounds like it's a gray area. So our goal is that you're actually physically, clinically working with the children. That's because that's what we're training you for, is to go out in the workforce and work with children. So those tend to be some gray areas as well. But Melissa does, she's been in conference with students and having their field meeting, and she'll just text me and say, hey, can you chat right now? And the student and Melissa will call me and say, okay, let's talk through this.
I love that. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's tricky, and I appreciate your comment, Natalie. But it's tricky because what we're trying to balance is, being fair to all of these other students who would love to have, an extra $10,000 while they're in graduate school, and so we're looking to be, that one slide that we have in our slide deck about working directly and primarily with children, youth, or children and adolescents and transitional aged youth, is like, that's the metric. And so we're always kind of stepping back and consulting with each other and making sure that we're not doing anything that would deny somebody else an opportunity if we're creating something that feels a little slippery slope-ish. But we consult a lot with each other, and I think that's really important. I feel like we have such a good relationship with Melissa and Lena and and Wendy's amazing. Wendy's been a field director before, so this is not like, you know, this is familiar territory, but these are important questions, and we're trying to be, you know, good stewards of this money for, you know, all kinds of reasons. But you know, it's exciting that we have it, and we want to be fair with it. Yeah, Nadia, you've got a question. Oh, you have to unmute yourself, Nadia. Nadia.
I keep hearing the same, yes, the leading message in the conference tonight, which is training with children. What are the specifics of the training with children? I kind of think differently. I kind of like go under and try to get to like the root. So would it be like trauma informed? Would it be anti-violence? Would it be teaching, learning from the children's developmental ages and stages? Would it be learning about their environment and how we can make them coexist with it better? Like, do you know any specifics of the training that we would be, you know, the possible applicants will be immersed in?
Yeah, so I mean, all I can do is give you examples of some of the trainings that we've had this past year and will have this spring. But you would be immersed in these training events, 2 in the fall, 2 in the spring. The first one that we had this past fall in September was Dr. Akbar and her colleague Nina Mendez, who talked about racism in child welfare and decolonizing child welfare. It was excellent. All of these trainings that we have are actually archived and stored on our YouTube channel. So if you go to our website, you'll be able to also go to the YouTube channel and check out some of the trainings that we've had so far. We also had a training in November that was amazing on race and urban adolescent identity development by 2 scholars at Drexel University, Dr. Ebony White and Dr. McClellan. I'm forgetting her first name right now, but also extraordinarily powerful. And one of the things I love that we do is we use this thing called RCQI, which is an acronym for Rapid Cycle Quality Improvement. And we're always trying to tweak and change and adapt to this remote delivery of this training content. So one of the things that we learned early in the pandemic was that people wanted follow-up question and answer time from these experts that we have, these interdisciplinary experts. And Fatima Bakayoko did a really amazing post-training event a couple of weeks ago, and it's archived on our YouTube channel, where Dr. White is talking about resiliency as a placeholder for social justice, and she really gets into some fascinating details and some real areas of advocacy and just powerful stuff. And Fatima Bakayoko is our graduate assistant who's been a part of the EPIC team now for a couple of years. And we're really proud of her and glad that she's graduating, but we're also really sad that she's leaving us at the end of the spring when she graduates with her MSW. But you can check out some of those training events, and then you can also, I'd be happy, Nadia, if you wanted to talk about the course, and I could kind of, you know, if you wanted to reach out to me, I could tell you kind of what's involved in the course. But it's an immersion in, you know, integrated care. What is that? You know, what is integrated care? What does it mean to be a part of a team when you're serving patients or clients or families or however they're referred to in your setting? It's a powerful way of working with other professions to intervene with children and adolescents and transitional aged youth, because you know so much about those other professions that you're able to do this really kind of like sweet little warm handoff where you can say, oh, the nurse here does blah, 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 fill in the blank. And that nurse can do the same thing with you as the social worker. And there's a magic that happens that also produces much better outcomes for client populations. If you're part of a team, you're part of an integrated care team, it's really powerful. And employers are looking for people who understand the power of integrated care, who understand the power of just having been taught interprofessionally. So when I say that we do these cool trainings, they're always people that are from different professions. So like a lawyer and a psychologist, or a social worker and a nutritionist or, whatever, but you're learning from people that have also learned from each other and that complement each other's disciplinary perspective.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, I got a little windy there. Sorry. All right, so Stephanie's leaving. Any questions by Stephanie? Caitlin?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could like explain the basics of what the application might look like this year or what it looked like in the past, if it's not always the same. Like, is it an essay? What is it?
Yeah, so we don't know if the application will change. We need to kind of review this and debrief this with the Interprofessional Education Task Force at the university level and the reviewers. But the application is different than it was last year. It's much more specific, related to your passion for interprofessional education, your passion for working as part of an integrated care team. And working with this population of, children, adolescents, and transitional aged youth. We want applicants that are really fired up about this particular focus and who plan on working with this population in these types of settings beyond graduation. So, you're interested in this as your specialized placement and in this program, this EPIC program, because you're gonna move and shake when you graduate with your MSW and go rock the world after you get this extra kind of immersion in EPIC. Hope that answers your question. All right, anybody else have questions? That's what we're here for. I see Joy. Oh, there it is.
Oh, geez. My face,
Sorry, I'm playing with you tonight.
can't play poker. So the applications will be available in March. Does that mean, and this might be a question more for Melissa, does that mean that we should expect to be placed for next year by the time the applications come out? Or
Joyanne, I just want to say before even Melissa has a chance to kind of weigh in that we haven't settled on any of those dates yet.
okay,
So we need to think about that in terms of like the cycle of the grant and what works for our field department, what works best for our students. There's so many stakeholders in this project that we need to think about, like what works for the reviewers and how much time do they need to review all of these applications. They have 19 MSW students, 5 MED school counseling students, and 2 doctoral and psychology students. And they also have to end their semesters and
right.
yeah.
So then let me rephrase my question.
Okay.
Should we expect whenever the applications come out that we should already know our placement, whenever that is? That's, I guess, probably a better way to put it. Forget the March timeframe.
Yeah, I think Melissa, you can weigh in on that, please, because we're still figuring out the date.
Yeah, that's definitely the idea, to kind of, to really, for you to either be referred, interviewed, or confirmed. Like you may not have a confirmed placement by March or April, like you may still be in the process of interviewing and whatnot, but our goal, our goal is to get you referred as quickly as possible, so and interviewed as quickly as possible. And come February, we're going to be moving very quickly, so but only as quickly as our field partners can work, because sometimes even there's other priorities. All of you are in the field right now, to kind of get a feel for what the priorities are on their end, at this point. So sometimes, and you all may have experienced this, that there could be a delay, before they reach out and schedule an interview. But that's something that we would communicate and work very closely again with Dr. Tennille and Wendy around identifying the students who won. I mentioned that the EPIC program is a high priority, for those of you who met me, who've met with me. We've had the conversation around, what's your interest in the EPIC program? What's it on? How do you rate it on your priority? Sometimes, and I think all of you on this call who I met with rated it a high priority, which doesn't surprise me that you're here tonight. You know, so just being able to know that we're factoring all that in, you know, and if it's a high priority and for some reason it doesn't work out, we're going to look at another agency that works with children, adolescents, and transition age youth. But yeah, the idea is that you would be referred, interviewed, or confirmed at you know, a qualifying site.
Okay, so just to follow up, to make sure I understand, referred or interviewed or placed in time for the grant. So if we've just been referred, we can still apply for the grant if that's how the timing works out.
Yeah.
Right. And the
Okay.
applications only go out to students who qualify. We do not send the applications out to all students. We only send an application to students who qualify. So we meet with Melissa and Lena right before we send out the applications, and we go down through every single name and say, yes, the student is referred. The student is referred. The student's already placed, and or even the student's really interested. The first one didn't work out, but we're still trying to find another place. Like every single name we go through. And so if you don't get an application, it's probably because you didn't qualify to receive one. But if you feel like, but wait, I'm at CHOP or whatever, working and, you know, whatever, then you would need to let us know right away.
Thank you for the clarification.
What other questions do y'all have? Anything, if you've got it in your mind, if you're worried about something or thinking about something, somebody else probably feels the same way. Do we answer all your questions? Well, that's just great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight and showing up and your interest in the EPIC program. We're really excited about it. It's a really wonderful learning opportunity. And you know, stay tuned. We will be kind of finalizing those dates. We still need to work out a few of the kinks and just make sure that, you know, our field department is supported. This is a big lift for them, and we respect that. We got to work collaboratively, and that's why we have to kind of make sure that these dates are super tight. One of the things that you should know is that we did this in a whole different timeline last year because we found out about the funding in the summer. And we had to quick, you know, have some town halls in the middle of the summer when people are away, and it just was much more complicated. So this is probably the timeline that we'll be using for the remaining years of the program. So we're figuring it out.
So
And
the thing I would recommend too is keep an eye on our website. I update our EPIC website, which I put in the chat a little bit earlier. That website has a whole bunch of information on there, including a calendar of events. And that calendar of events will include the dates once we get them in set. So you'll see them pop up on there. And then I'll also probably post them under student resources on that page as well. So that website, I'm in there updating it. Like I just updated it now. Like it's constantly being updated. And if that website doesn't answer your questions, you know, Dr. Tennille and I are always available by email, and this is my only job. So is this grant. It's part-time, but it's my only job. So you just email or call me, and if I don't have an answer, I should at least know who to send you to that does have an answer.
Yeah, Wendy's such a great resource. Thanks, Wendy. Well, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. Take care of yourselves.